Game of Thrones was so good at first. When it launched in 2011, Game of Thrones was actually one of the best shows on television, and not just the show people thought was the best show on television. The characterization was complex, the twists were all foreshadowed, and it managed to be gritty and realistic without being dour and completely cynical. And pretty much all of that was because of the amazing source material, A Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. The first in his A Song of Ice and Fire series, there is a reason these books are some of the most popular pieces of fantasy literature today, and it isn't because of the tight release schedule. The first season of the show pretty much copy-pasted the books into a cell text document, added minor changes that in many cases made it better or at least more suited to television, and then let a bunch of talented actors, directors, set designers, prop makers, DOPs, camera people, lighting people, ADs, producers, and of course, best boys make it into the best visual adaptation of the books possible. But after that is when things started to go downhill. The writers of the show began to make more and more changes from the book, and those changes became more and more extreme. And look, I'm not here to complain about how Sansa Stark's dress was blue in the books but purple in the show, or whatever other minor complaints people have, and I'm not going to complain about the stuff done to make it a better TV show, or the plot changes that were dumb but ignorable. No, I'm going straight for the big dogs. The changes that undermine the thematic layers and very meaning of the books themselves. The changes that go against the spirit of George R.R. Martin's work. Number 5. The North forgets how cool it used to be. We're going to start off pretty simple, with the show's portrayal of the Northern Lords. See, after the Boltons take over the North in the latter half of the series, the books in the show diverge wildly in the North's reaction to this. In the show, resistance amounts to about a wet fart. We barely see what anyone thinks about Ramsay Snow being made a Bolton, murdering his own father, and forcing Sansa Stark to marry him. All of that was less important than scenes of Ramsay torturing people, I guess. In the books, meanwhile, it was made clear that the entirety of the North hated being under the Boltons, and many houses resisted in their own unique ways. Key amongst them being the Manderleys, who cooked 2 Freys into pies and fed them to the Boltons. Wyman Manderley made it clear he wanted revenge, but was willing to play the game and wait for his opportunity to take it, and help a more deserving leader rule the North. We saw that basically every house was loyal to the Starks. It was a repayment for the good nature and honour with which the Starks ruled the North. Not only did it make perfect sense within the world and the characters, but on a deeper level it showed that the Stark style of ruling ultimately worked. They inspired friendship and loyalty in their subjects, to an extent no other house really seems to be able to. Instead, every Northern Lord in the show is a stooge who instantly turns to Ramsay's side, with the lone exception of Lyanna Mormont. In the books, Mormont's only appearance so far was a letter that read, "Bear Island knows no king but the king in the north, whose name is Stark." This, of course, being awesome, made her an instant fan favourite, which the show decided to milk for every penny it was worth, as she became the badass 12-year-old who tells all the Northern Lords what cowardly idiots they are. So she repeatedly puts them all in their place, including Wyman Manderley, despite his book's counterpart also being awesome. Like, book?
Foes and false friends are all around me, Lord Davos. They infest my city like roaches, and at night I feel them crawling over me. The fat man's fingers coiled into a fist, and all his chins trembled. My son Wendell came to the twins a guest. He ate Lord Walder's bread and salt, and hung his sword upon the wall to feast with friends. And they murdered him. Murdered, I say. And may the phrase choke upon their fables.
Show.
Your son was butchered at the Red Wedding, Lord Manderley, but you refused the call.
So instead of showing how the Starks' own loyalty to their bannermen has paid off and left them with a large army when everyone else's forces are dwindling, we instead get the hard-nosed Northerners as easily turned wimps. We see the negative reactions for the Starks' honour, as we'll discuss in my next point, but not the positives. It's a small change, which is why it's number 5, but I think it's important to mention. It makes the show morally shallower and more cynical. It's, in my opinion, a bad and pointless change. Number 4. Robb's Regrettable Romance. Robb Stark, son of Ned and Catelyn, spent most of seasons 2 and 3 of the show leading the Northern armies in a war against the Lannisters, making difficult leadership decisions and having to deal with the moral complexities of war. Also, Mackinaw Nuna Chaplin. See, Chaplin played a character called Talissa, a volunteer battlefield nurse and a character created specifically for the show. She and Robb spent some time courting, fell in love, got married, and in doing so scorned the Lord of the Twins, Warder Frey, whose daughter Robb was promised to. So he murdered them both, along with a large portion of the Stark's army. Tragic, right? And not too dissimilar to the books. See, we only really see Robb's campaign from his mother, Catelyn's point of view in the books, and she isn't there for a lot of this part of the story. She's off doing other stuff? So it makes sense to fill all this stuff in, give Robb's wife more character, and just generally fill up 10 hours of screen time. 10 hours is a long time, guys, and why not throw some Doom love into your show? It's good drama. Except it's actually incredibly different to what happened in the book. In the book, Robb marries a woman named Jane Westerling, daughter of Gawain and Sybil Westerling. See, in the books, Robb is injured whilst attacking the Crag, the home of the Westerlings, and is being nursed back to health by Jane when he discovers Bran and Rickon have been killed. Distraught, a grief-ridden Robb sleeps with Jane and marries her the next day to protect her honour. So, why is this a bad change? Well, basically, it changes Robb's failure from the same as his father's, putting honour on what is right before what is smart, to doing something stupid because he fell in love. On a character level, it really steals a lot of sympathy we have for Robb. Both were stupid decisions, yes, but one was a stupid decision made by a 15-year-old boy under immense pressure, doing what his father would have done. But in the show he's older, the pressure is de-emphasized for the love story, and instead of making decisions for honour, he's making it for love. It's a selfless act in the books, something he does to protect someone else, and it's also heavily implied he was a delusional wreck at the time and was basically coerced into doing it. This is something I can sympathise with, is understandable, and makes the audience sad when he gets horribly murdered. Whilst the love story more openly plays on the heartstrings, as their love eventually destroys them, I would argue it is less dramatically satisfying in the long run. Furthermore, it also detracts from the book's themes of honour and integrity being examined in a feudal and often brutal society like Westeros. In the book, Robb's failure and ultimate punishment is for not understanding how to play the Game of Thrones. It ties into everything: his father's death, Sansa's marriage, Tyrion's exile, Jon Snow's death, and so much more. All come from their inability or disadvantages in playing the game. It's a harsh reminder that the world will stomp on you if you let it. But in the show it becomes a punishment of love, compassion and joy. We aren't being reminded of the horrible tragedies that can happen when one plays with politics. We're being shown that happiness and romance are to be punished. It underlines a subtle difference. The books are brutal and harsh, but ultimately, deep down, fair. George R. R. Martin wants his characters to be happy, but wants them to suffer immensely for their happy ending. The show just wants drama, and to punish any sign of anything other than a kill everyone in my path mentality. Also, I'm sorry, but the pregnant woman getting stabbed in the stomach was too far for my tastes. We get it, Game of Thrones, you're grimdark, but sometimes you don't need to be that grimdark. Number 3. Tyrion Goody Two-Shoes Lannister. Tyrion Lannister. Everyone loves Tyrion Lannister, right? He's so funny, he makes all sorts of hilarious quips. I mean, other than that one time he murdered a defenseless woman in cold blood, and that time he broke Marillion the Singer's hand because he didn't like him, and the sleeping with slave girls, burning down commoners' houses, laughing at hanged Stark soldiers, and committing the biggest crime in Westeros, that of kinslaying. Who else did we see do that? Oh, yeah, Ramsay Bolton. And if you're asking where most of these things came from, it's from the books. See, of course, for all these things we still like Tyrion. He has done many horrible things, but equally many of them were justified or at least understandable. Killing Tywin is something that none of us can disagree with. Burning down the houses was to make the city easier to defend, and who doesn't hate a bard? These dark actions he undertakes in the books are ultimately outweighed by Tyrion being one of the most morally upright, intelligent and witty characters in the books. He's a complex character, layered, but the show took that away. We barely get a glimpse of Tyrion's more questionable actions and darker moments in the show. Instead, he slaps Joffrey more, makes more jokes, is right more. And I hate to point fingers, but I believe it's because of the character's fandom, both in the audience and in the writer's room. The character is so beloved, why would you have him do anything bad? Why can't he just do the stuff we liked him doing? You know, getting hilariously drunk and making one-liners, instead of, you know, getting depressingly drunk and making barbed, witty remarks that drive people away from him because of his deep-seated issues. It's kind of ruined Tyrion's character, and is one of the most blatant examples of, in my opinion, a lack of understanding of the source material. Every character in A Song of Ice and Fire is flawed. Every character does good and bad things. They achieve greatness, but they also make horrible mistakes. It's what showed the series' actual depth. The show, meanwhile, is content to make Tyrion a fun-loving, likeable guy who never does anything bad or wrong. He's a meme machine. Look at him slapping Joffrey! That's more important than character development. But if we want to look at the bright side of this one, they at least removed him talking about where the whores go for an entire frickin' book, so it's not all bad. Number 2. Skeptical of Septons. If you have only seen the Game of Thrones TV series and not read the books, you may not have heard of Septon Maribald, or the elder brother of the Quiet Isle, or the Quiet Isle at all, for that matter, but you may remember Septon Ray, portrayed by Ian McShane, who served much the same purpose as those two characters from the books. In Maribald's case, he covered the role of the soldier who went to war who eventually turned to peaceful ways and pontificated on the effects of war on the mind of those who went through it. In the elder brother of the Quiet Isle's case, he took over finding and nursing Sandor Clegane back to health. So they replaced two characters with one. There's nothing wrong with that. If anything, that's solid adaptational work, Ryan. Stop complaining on the internet and get a job. But aha! I have fooled you, and you have activated my trap card. I wasn't even going to complain about that. What I was going to complain about is what they do with Septon Ray. Because, Jesus Christ, did they fuck this storyline up. See, in the books, Brienne meets Septon Maribald as she traverses the Riverlands in search of Sansa Stark. They travel together, and the Septon delivers one of the most beautiful, poetic moments from the entirety of A Song of Ice and Fire, talking about how and why wars break soldiers and make them cruel. It's brilliantly written, and I highly recommend you find it and read it. Well, actually, I recommend you read the books as a whole, but if you hate reading, just find this speech. So of course in the show they removed the speech, and instead used the character to ram home how incredibly grimdark and mature the show is. See, in the show, we see Sandor Clegane, previously thought dead, working with Septon Ray to build a shelter for a group of pacifists who have fled the war. Yeah, you heard me right. Pacifists. In Game of Thrones. Not going to end well. Because Game of Thrones seems obsessed with violence and enamored with using it as a dramatic device, there is nothing more deserving of punishment in the minds of the writers than a bunch of hippy-dippy, socialist fucking pacifists. Because in Game of Thrones you're only worth as many people you're willing to kill to get what you want. Sansa's lame because she tries to be political, but Arya's awesome because she murders like 50 people in cold blood. Oh, we'll get to you soon enough, that storyline. So of course those goddamn communists are all murdered in cold blood to motivate the Hound's return to awesome murder times. Because we needed to remind you, nothing good can exist in the world of Game of Thrones, and if you try to achieve anything without, I don't know, an awesome sword fight, you aren't worth our time. The thematic effects here are obvious. Maribald, the elder brother, and the whole of the Quiet Isle represented something special in the books. A place that rose above Westeros' need for feudal violence and instead focused on peace. We got to see for the first time how the War for the Iron Throne hurt the commoners, instead of just the lords and ladies. It made us, as readers, realise how stupid and pointless this war was, how far removed from the needs of the people the Westerosi rulers were. It made us question our own loyalties and beliefs about the characters we had seen previously. But of course, all that was too complex for the golden age of television, so instead we removed all the beautiful writing and depth and replaced it with, yeah, we know they're lame, right? But now you get to see the Hound murder some more people. That's what you all wanted, that's why you all watched the show. It traded depth for violence, and beauty for a cheap crowd pop. Also, if this is the direction Martin goes in the books, then I'll just copy and paste this whole part of the video into a top 10 worst parts of the A Song of Ice and Fire book series, and that'll save me some work, so fingers crossed. Number 1. Cutting out Lady Stoneheart's stony heart. So we all remember the Red Wedding, right? I talked about it like 10 minutes ago. All your show watching friends tweeting about it whilst all your book reading friends smiled smugly in the background. Robb Stark, his wife Talissa, and his mother Catelyn all murdered by the Freys, along with a huge part of their army. In the show, that's where it ends for these characters. But in the books, not so much. See, Beric Dondarrion, who in the show has no purpose currently, sacrificed his life to bring back Catelyn Stark. However, to say she came back wrong is an understatement. Catelyn came back as a merciless, vengeful zombie known as Lady Stoneheart. Her skin was grey from floating in a river for days, her face was scratched from the madness of her last moments, and her throat was still slit. The wound that killed her. Sounds like a campfire horror story, right? because that's what she was. See, on top of a horrifying appearance, Catelyn had lost herself. Whereas in life she was compassionate and caring, treatment of Jon Snow excluded, in death she was driven by only one thing: revenge. And she didn't care who she had to kill to get it. She became a true monster in every sense of the word, and this was used to represent the futility of revenge, and what it did to a person. Much like Maribald represented the futility and damage of war, Stoneheart represented how being driven only by revenge would destroy a person. Yes, she was a literal zombie, but she was also a symbolic zombie, a double zombie, if you will. And it went further as she corrupted the Brotherhood without banners from a group of soldiers defending the commoners to a bunch of murderers. Her hanging of random phrase wasn't treated as awesome, but as a horrible degradation and destruction of a character we loved. Unless you're the internet, in which case you hate wives for some reason? I don't know, guys, I just don't know. So, of course, instead the show decided to replace this with Arya Stark, the daughter of Catelyn, going away, becoming an awesome magical ninja assassin, and poisoning all the Freys. And it being treated as triumphant and awesome. She's 17 and we're supposed to be cheering for her having become so morally unaware she commits mass murder? I get that the Freys are bad guys, and yeah, getting them to laugh about the Red Wedding really made me hate them, but this goes beyond justice and straight into the realm of horrifying revenge. The realm the books went to great lengths to prove was bad and pointless. Yet the show can't quite seem to grasp that. This horrifying mass murder is treated as if it's some sort of great, awesome moment we should be telling our friends about, because it was so badass. Guys, I really don't want to hate Game of Thrones. I love the A Song of Ice and Fire books, loved the first couple of seasons. I genuinely think Blackwater is one of the best television hours ever produced. I think the cast is great, the cinematographers are great, the set designers, the riggers, the costume people, the props department, CGI drones, the runners and caterers are all top notch. But I think the writers and the directors are failing them all by creating a show so morally and thematically detached from George R.R. Martin's work. On top of the inconsistent characterization, the frankly idiotic storytelling and some incredibly questionable morality, the show does a disservice to a book series so full of emotion and thematic depth. It trades in intricate plots and interesting ideas for cheap violence and quick cheers. Moments that made you think for moments that make you tweet about how totally awesome they were. And the fact that it is lauded as the best show on television, beating out shows like Mad Men and Mr. Robot for Outstanding Drama Series Emmys is frankly insulting. The fact that we're treating a show so full of pandering and meaningless violence as a work of art, and a show so cynical in its grimdarkness as morally complex, is laughable. Is this really the golden age of box set dramas, if our most lauded show is actually a mess? I don't know. Maybe it's great and I'm just the wrong one here. But that's my opinion. That's why I don't like HBO's Game of Thrones. And if you disagree, please leave a comment. I want to discuss this. I think it's interesting. I think Game of Thrones is an interesting thing to discuss. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.